I'm Al from Iconic Baseball.
And I'm Brian, the High Pop Professor.
Welcome to Brothers Duo!
All right, and welcome everyone. Welcome back to our next episode of Brothers Duo, episode 8. And in this episode today, we're going to talk about value in collecting, value in our collections. And so there are a number of directions that we'd like to go and meander today in this discussion. But I think first, so once we had turned the recording off during our last episode, Iconic Al, you posed to me a question that kind of shook me. It was really a two-parter, and I was a little shaken by the second part. Well, it's a theoretical. I'd like you to go ahead and share that question with our viewing audience so they can consider this question for themselves and their own collections, because I think it's important, and I think it offers really important, good insight into what our goals are, our long-term collecting goals, where we see our collections going, and how we want to build that out to achieve those goals. So go ahead and ask that question that you asked me, at least the first part of it, and then we'll follow up with the second part.
Okay, first of all, happy Sunday. Good to see you, Brian.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we got off this discussion after we turned off the recording last time, because we were talking about insurance and talking about how scary it would be if we did lose our collection, and should we be insuring and all that stuff. And so I posed this, I would call it a thought experiment. What if your collection was stolen? And, as disturbing as that is to think about, it does happen. And then what if you were to receive a disbursement from your insurance company for the full insured value of your collection? So as shaking as that would be, losing something maybe you spent decades building, that some of it would be irreplaceable by definition. If that happened and you got a check from your insurance company for the full insured value of your collection, what do you do? Do you try to methodically rebuy every card and every autograph and every piece you had? Or do you take the check and say, okay, that's a lot of money. Maybe I'm good. Maybe I got to do something else with this. Or do you start anew in a whole different way? Do you collect differently now that you have this lump sum of money that you can then disperse however you want in the hobby or not? So that's the thought experiment. What do you do with that value, that check? Do you start anew in the same way? Do you start anew in a different way? Or do you just take that, roll it into a home, roll it into something else?
Yeah, that's it's a scary thought experiment. And I thought about this, at least for me, because I want to hear your response to this too. I think I know how you're going to answer. But as for me, I think a decent chunk of my collection I probably would want to reacquire. Mm-hmm. I really do collect what I love, and I don't think that's going to change, even if my collection disappeared or got destroyed in a fire or whatever. And so I think I probably, for a good chunk of it, I probably would try to rebuild it. But I think that it would change in not just what I'm getting so much, but the order in which I would try to obtain them. And so what I mean by that is that, so if my hobby account were all of a sudden infused with this gigantic sum that I'd never seen a number that big in my hobby account before, mm-hmm. that would, there's opportunity there that, I could get into things that I wouldn't ordinarily have, I wouldn't be able to get pieces quite that large. And so it's a rare opportunity. So I think what I might do is start with, and sort of, I'm going to use the big bucket sort of analogy. And you've got a bucket and you've got your collection. It's not a bonsai tree necessarily, but if you've got your collecting bucket and all the stuff you're collecting goes in the bucket, and some of your pieces are big, so you have these big rocks, these big stones, and you can fill up the bucket with all these big stones in there until it's all the way full, and you can't fit any more big stones in this bucket. And then you ask someone, is that bucket full? It's like, yes, it is full, except that you could still pick up some pebbles and sprinkle them in carefully, and those pebbles would filter down through the stones, and until there's no more pebbles can fit in there. And then you could ask someone, okay, well, the bucket's full now, except that you could also get a big handful of sand and sprinkle the sand, and the sand would filter down through the pebbles as well, right? And then there's no more sand can fit in the bucket. And is it full? It's like, yes, it is full, except you could take a pitcher of water and slowly and carefully, the water is going to settle down in the sand until it gets to the very top, forms the bubble on the top there, and then it's full. And I guess the point is, when I got my collection as it is, all of a sudden we've got an empty bucket. I made a video the other day talking about potential targets, grails that I'm next considering targeting for this year, and I'm realizing I even if one of those came up, I probably couldn't go for it right now. I'm not in a position to be able to make a decent stab at it. I don't have the funds right now to do that. So I think I would try to target the big stones first. I would take that opportunity to, not that I would really change much about what I'm doing, but I could go after a PMG or a 96 certified mirror gold, or I could go after a Donruss Crusade red. I could go after some of these really giant cards that I love. But instead of having to wait around and save up for them, I might have to wait around until they show their face, until they become available.
Yep.
But I would be in a unique position to be able to attack those, pick those really tough, big ones up first. And as the smaller ones become available, can more slowly acquire those. But again, I'd probably pick up the bigger ones first. So I would not really change much about what I collect, but I think the order in which I would try to acquire them, that would change.
Yeah, it's much easier to get those big rocks in place first versus having a long-term collection. You don't really you don't have that kind of visibility when you're collecting over a period of many years and decades.
Right.
So to have a lump sum to start with, having some idea how big your jar or your container is, your bucket, and then you can start, okay, what are my big rocks going to look like? What are those big stones going to look like? Because once your big stones are in there, it's much harder to go in and dig out the pebbles in the sand. It's like selling off a lot of little cards is much more difficult in reality to then make room for another big one. So it's important to have those big ones, have some idea of what big ones you want and what size that collection is going to be and how much net worth is that going to take up relative to, your overall worth.
And I would say too, as often as collectors, will sometimes change the direction of what they want to do. I would say make darn sure what those big ones are, because every time you change direction or change your idea of where you'd like to take your PC, there's a cost to that transaction. There's going to be eBay fees. There's going to be shipping. There's going to be, everyone takes their cut. PayPal takes their fee, whatever it might be, and so it's costly if they're big cards, and so to move in and out of them. So to make sure that you're actually targeting and focused on the exact ones that you want, and then to be able to acquire those, I feel like with those big stones in place, that's going to put you in a position where, okay, now the other ones you've got the anchors, in place. Now you can build a solid foundation. Your bonsai tree is nicely nestled and rooted deep down in these things, and now it can spring forth and be shaped the way you want it to be.
Yeah, and then there's the whole thing where the big stuff tends to get harder and harder to buy in the future. So might as well get those as soon as you can. There
you go. Yeah, maybe you can only get it, and maybe in 10 years it's not even achievable. Who knows? I don't know.
Yeah, it cycles, but
it does. So how would you? So I think I know how you would answer your question, but go ahead. So how would you? So if your collection were vanished overnight, and you got your insurance disbursement, what would you do?
Well, my collection wouldn't look too much different, I don't think. I think that's why curation is so important, because the active curation implies that you're constantly weaning, constantly trimming around the edges, making sure that the things you own are the things you want to own, and in the proportion you want to own them, and with the balance that you want and the things you enjoy. So hopefully if you're actively curating your collection, then the things you have are the things you really want to have. And there's not a lot of extra excess there that is just dead weight, just taking up space. Because, if it's just taking up space, then, well, why do you have it? Like there's value sitting there that you could be unlocking, but you're not, So I don't think there's a lot of dead weight in my collection. Everything that I have, pretty much, I want to have, and there's a reason I have it. So if it were all to disappear, I may start back in with this idea that I still will have my top 100 list. I hope that that wouldn't be stolen. That's documented. So I would probably start with the mentality of I want 2 meaningful pieces for every top 100 player, and one would include an autograph of some kind, and then the other would be another meaningful card or piece of some kind. So my goal would be 2 meaningful pieces, and it might make a hard cap at that. I might actually keep it to a hard cap of 2 higher importance, really high quality, meaningful pieces for every top 100 player, and try to make that my collection. And it's not too different from what I'm doing now, except now I have usually more than 2 for a lot of players. For the pre-war guys, it is usually about 2, an autograph and then a pre-war card, something like that. But I'd probably make it a hard cap, something like that, of like 2 really nice cards for each, or really nice pieces for each player.
I would have such a hard time narrowing it down to figure out exactly which 2, because I mean, that's a whole topic right there. How would you even decide for whatever Tony Gwynn, like what those 2 pieces are?
Right.
Like,
but
I don't know.
You would adore those 2 pieces. The 2 Tony Gwynn items that I would end up keeping would be like, wow, it's really special. And that's another follow-up to the thought experiment. What if you could only keep 50% of your collection?
Ooh.
Okay, that was you could only keep 50%. You could only protect. Yeah, you could only keep 50%. And that would be more like what my answer would be to that is, if I have on average, 3 or 4 pieces for each player on average, then I'd have to make some hard cuts. I'd have to cut it back to 2 per player. And then I'd have 200 pieces. That would be my collection, 2 players, two pieces for each of the 100 players. And it would be a very hard thing to do, but I could do it, if I needed to.
That's fascinating. So many people, over the course of the year, they have their targets of what they want to acquire, and it's always accumulation, get this, get that, pick this up.
Yeah.
And you're kind of looking at this like, where can I cut? What can I trim? How can I go from 350 down to 250 or 270? Or
I don't know if I'm just weird, but I'm thinking of like, why not to buy a card? And I'm trying to find a reason why not to buy something, and why not to invest or buy a certain player. So I have a very critical way of evaluating. This is just for myself, and that makes it easier for me. Sorry, I lost my light again. But yeah, I'm looking for reasons not to buy a card and not to buy a player. And when I can't find any good reason, or I truly love something, then it's very easy for me then to see that, like, there's no reason for me not to buy this. There is no reason for me not to buy this player. That's when I know.
That's a heck of a litmus test. I like that, though. That makes sense. But it's funny how it is kind of the opposite. That I think the opposite way a lot of people do approach the hobby, and that there's a lot of I feel like a lot of people just sort of impulse buy.
Yeah. Oh, this is cool. I'm going to buy this. Oh, that's cool. I'll buy this. Oh, that's not,
Yes. I feel like that's kind of the norm. And so what you're describing sounds very weird, I think, to a lot of people. But I mean, when you say it that way, though, it sounds perfectly logical, and that makes a whole heck of a lot of sense. So that's really cool. Find reasons not to buy something, and when there aren't those reasons, that's good. Okay, so that was pretty much what I thought you were going to say with that response. I like your follow-up, though, about if you only keep 50% of it. I like that, and that's a good experiment for winnowing that down. Now, if you remember, you had another follow-up that you asked about, if you lost your collection, how would you collect, or would you collect, or how would you rebuild if you choose to rebuild your collection? And then, do you remember the follow-up that you asked?
I don't. No.
Okay. Well, the follow-up you asked said, okay, well, if you're going to make changes, and if you're not going to collect in the exact same way that you currently are right now, and this is where I felt a little bit attacked, but still, he said, okay, so if you would change directions and you would get some new things, or go in a slightly different direction, a slightly different tack, why aren't you collecting that way right now.
Yeah, now I remember.
Right now.
Yeah.
Why aren't you doing that at this moment? You could functionally sell everything that you have in your collection and get that market value. Now, it might take 6 months to get full market value. You might be patient with some of the sales that you make, but you could do that. You could actually get that value and go in that direction right now. You don't have to wait till your collection gets destroyed or stolen or whatever. If you would go in a different direction,
Yeah.
what's stopping you?
Yeah, and theoretically it would be the same. Your collection being stolen and you getting a check for the full value of it would functionally be the same as you selling your collection. So, or selling 50% of your collection, taking 50% and saying, I'm gonna wean this down and trim this down, and any one of us could do that anytime. It's just the time, the effort, the expense, the emotional baggage that we carry along with some of these things. That's the only thing stopping us. But if you would collect differently and do something different with that disbursement or with that insurance reimbursement, then that's a good question to be asking yourself. Like, why am I not doing that now? Why am I not just unlocking some value and starting anew, the way that I really want my collection to look and to be?
That's an awesome follow-up question. And again, and I think if you hear that question and if you feel attacked, what does that say about you?
Right.
That means you're probably well. If you would go in a different direction, well, look, maybe it's time to move some things along, and why not? This is your collection. This is how you want to collect. I think that what might stop a lot of people. I've been thinking about this since you posed it last week. A dangerous thing to be thinking about things.
Yeah.
I was thinking about this, and I feel like some people are going to have, at least for particular things. So collectors like to work on projects. Maybe it's building a set. Maybe it's a player run. Maybe it's building a certain, whatever it might be, a certain run of cards. And, there's the idea of a sunken cost fallacy, where you've already put this much time, this much effort, this much energy, this much resources, money into working on this run. And it's true, if it got stolen midway, would you really want to continue that run all the way? Or would you want to abandon that and then choose to take those resources in a different direction? And I feel like, after someone has already put in, maybe years and maybe a lot of money into this, there's that sort of completionist, tendency that comes out, and people say, no, we just want to finish this thing. Let's get it over with. Let's complete the set. Let's finish let's finish this, that. And so I think that they've already sunk all this cost and time and energy into it. And that right there, I think is a big stopper that would prevent people from going on and just doing that and just liquidating what they would move, to choose to get into what they would like to.
Yeah, it's the I've already gone this far mentality. I might as well keep going. Or I've identified with that now. Like, now I'm a guy who collects baseballs. So I can't sell my baseballs. I can't sell my signed baseballs because I'm a guy who collects baseballs. And everyone knows that I collect baseballs. And oh man, if Al sells his baseballs and he's no longer a baseball guy, like then so we identify with what we collect too. So that becomes part of our collecting identity.
Gosh, it's so true, man. That's true. Not that I would give up on a guy like Greg Maddux, but like I'm known as like the Maddux guy or whatever, or one of the Maddux guys.
Like people's heads would explode if you decided to pivot and start collecting Tony Gwynn exclusively.
Right. Love Tony Gwynn, and there's the reason why I have a little column A, a little column B. Look, you can dabble in both.
The thing is, like, we don't have any obligation to keep being the people that we've been. Like, we really don't. Like, if you wanted to sell your entire Maddux collection and start collecting Gavin Lux, I wouldn't really understand it, but you have every right to do it.
Hey, that 101 superfractor.
Yeah, knock yourself out. It's your damn collection.
That's true. I hadn't really considered about the collecting identity, but it's so true. It's so true. We I've also heard it say that the more possessions and items and objects and collectibles, the more things that you own, the more that they own you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And to a point, this is sort of a manifestation of that. Yeah. And so I can see that. I can identify with that being a thing.
And then this other concept that I like, while we're on the topic, of weaning down things and justifying what we own. It's like, every every day that you own something at its market value, you're choosing that item over the cash that you could get for it. So
Yeah.
if you have a card that's worth $500, every day you wake up in the morning, you're choosing to own that card over $500 in cash.
Right.
And so you just better be damn sure that's what you're choosing and that's okay with you. Like if I own a card that's worth that much, like for me, that's a lot of money. For me,
Yeah.
a $500 card is like a pretty big card for me. And
Yeah.
so, going through my collection and having some idea of values is important, because if at any point I'm looking through my collection and saying to myself very honestly, like, hey, you know what? I think I'd rather have the $500 than that card. Then it's time to move that card along, because I can do something better with it that I can probably enjoy more than that particular card at that particular time. So that if that card occupies that much space in your collection monetarily, then there better be a damn good reason, that it deserves that.
Yeah, it's funny what happens when the value of cards start to rise.
Mm-hmm.
As we are getting more valuable cards and acquiring them in our collections, there are certain considerations that sort of have to be made, and that's one of them. Look, last month, I sold my Ricky Henderson Diamond King autograph.
Yep.
And this is not a card that I was wanting to sell or trying to sell per se. I just figured there was an opportunity at that moment because of recent events. That card spiked in value.
Yeah.
And it's not that I don't want that card. I still want it back. But for me, when I had an opportunity to sort of triple my money on that, I figured, look, I can wait a year, 2 years, and reacquire one down the line, and I can be patient. I can do that. And I can choose to reallocate that. And it doesn't mean I don't like the card. No, I love the card. It was painful, to have to drop that in the mailbox. But I'm thinking logically, I'm trying to think rationally, and to some extent try to separate emotion out from the logic of, okay, well, this is a temporary spike. It will go down again. And when things settle down again, that's going to be reacquirable for less down the line. Will it be the amount before? Probably not.
Didn't you get like $400 for it? I mean, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, well, that's the whole thing. Yeah, I bought it for about I bought it for, I think it was 120 or 125, somewhere in there. And yeah, I sold it for like 340. So I mean, right. So look, I just think that I can probably in a year or two get a really great one for about 200.
Yeah,
so
my only hesitation would be it was a unique piece. Signed Diamond Kings don't grow on trees, especially once the player passes. God rest Ricky Henderson, rest in peace. But once a player passes and you have a very specific card that you really want signed, and it's a really nice signature, that would be my only hesitation on selling a card like that, because it's not a guarantee that you'll be able to get it cheaper later.
Right.
With a Ricky Henderson rookie, absolutely.
Yeah.
But because
it's,
those, high pop
it's
cards.
a gamble. It's a gamble. It's a calculated risk. And it was one that I was willing to take. So we'll see if it works out for me. I hope it does. But it's not something that I do every day either. But something else, again, we're talking about value and collecting and the value of these cards. And there are two other things that I wanted to at least discuss and talk about. And one of them is that, so in reacquiring, cards in my collection, going back to the hypothetical situation, some of the cards I pick up would be very inexpensive cards that just bring me joy. I would want to get a Ken Griffey Jr. Rifleman card.
Of course.
For 50 cents. I would need to buy one. And it's 50 cents. And I love that card. I want a Bo Jackson Bow Breaker card from the 91 score set. Like I need to just buy one. And yeah, it'll be like $2, but I'm going to buy one because I would like to have one in my collection. It brings me joy. I love seeing it. I just, yeah, that's what I would like. And so there's an idea here where, if you're going to spend, $100, $200 on a card, the amount of money that you are allocating into this one card should, hopefully, that card should be that many times more meaningful to you than a $1 card, a $2 card. It should bring you a proportional amount of joy in your collection because again, it's opportunity cost, right? You have that value, and you can allocate it any way you want. So yeah, you could get 100, $1 cards that you love, and that's a great way. And I would certainly would do that. Yes, you got a top loader binder full of $1, really $1 to $5 cards, love them, and they bring me great joy. But if and when you're gonna reallocate that and put that all into one card or two cards that are bigger, they should bring you that amount of joy, because again, every day you're holding on to that, you're choosing, right? You're choosing that instead of the other thing.
This is assuming you're approaching it as a 100% collector. 100% collector. Then we talk about what percentage collector, investor, and speculator are you? Because there are three distinct things.
Mm-hmm.
A collector buys purely what they like. Everything else be damned. I love this card. I'm going to buy it because I love it. And an investor buys what others like, and what has a market, what is desirable to the market as a whole. And a speculator buys whatever people will like, tries to find what they will like, maybe more than they do today, what may appreciate and value in the future. So I think all of us do all three of those things in some proportion, depending on what card they're looking at or what portion of their collection they're talking about. There are portions of my collection that are 100% collector. I could care less. We were talking about that for you with Sean Casey.
Yeah.
We don't care what the market for Sean Casey looks like. We don't care what the value of our Sean Casey cards is. It's never going to matter to us, because we love the guy, and we have a personal connection with him. So yeah, we're going to go after some Sean Casey cards here and there, and that's just a pure collecting endeavor. And then when we're spending maybe a more significant amount on a card, then it comes in. Okay, you want to make sure you're buying something that's going to hold its value, at least hold up over time as a store of value. At least I do. Yeah. And then in some ways you try to go to where the ball is going. Where's the ball going to be, and then try to run to that spot before it gets there. And,
right.
And that's the situation where you may find a set that's undervalued, or a player that that you think is going to be more significant in the future, and try to beat the crowd to the punch. And that's where even a collector can also be a speculator. So it's collector, investor, speculator, and we all run the gamut, most of us, in all those things in some fashion.
So is your ideal card purchase one that sort of checks all three boxes?
Absolutely. Like I'll make an example of my Babe Ruth card that I've had for a few years now, and it's a W515 1923 W515 Babe Ruth card. It's a strip card. It's a beautiful presenting example. I love the card. I love the caricature of Babe Ruth on it. It displays him beautifully. It's the first year of Yankee Stadium. It's Babe Ruth's one of his best seasons when this came out. Is his prime of his career. I love the card. So as a collector, it scratches my itch. It is a prime playing days Babe Ruth card. So it's like, boom, that's it. But then also, I think it will, it's Babe Ruth, so it's also an investable card. Pretty much any playing days Babe Ruth is also an investment. It's an investable card. And then also, as a speculator, I think those strip card sets and those maybe more obscure pre-war sets are going to see more action because they're low population. And I think they will appreciate to a higher percentage than your mainstream Gaudis will, which are already pretty pricey for a Gaudi Babe Ruth. On the flip side, you can buy a strip card of Babe Ruth for a fraction of the price typically. So I think the strip cards are a place where more and more people are going, because then you can get a playing days Ruth for a fraction of the price. So in that way, that Babe Ruth card checks my collector, investor, and speculator boxes all at once. And so that's a buy. That's when yep, that's the one.
Yeah, I can't fault your logic there. I mean, yeah, you compare the value, again, look at the values here of that strip card to what the Gaudis, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, maybe it's because they're hand cut. I don't know. I don't know what the reason why is, but I mean, your card is one of the cleanest, nicest presenting Babe Ruths that I've ever seen. And
I love it. It's my Babe Ruth. That's just
incredible.
When a card fits, it.
Yeah, but I guess the point of that being is that it's not just a card in your collection; it's like your biggest card, and that's my point too. Is that as the value of these things, as they scale upward, it's important that along that continuum, that spectrum from collector to investor to speculator, it becomes more important that those pickups start to really check all three of those boxes as opposed to just the collector ones.
Totally agree. When you're spending that kind of money,
yeah,
you have to give more thought to, I'm probably not going to buy like a $2,000 Sean Casey card, if that even exists.
Oh,
I don't think it even exists.
I'm sure. No, I think it does. I think it would be his 99 metal Gem Masters.
Uh-huh.
I mean,
Oh,
most common player Gem Masters. It's the Metal Universe PMG one of ones. It's like a parallel of the PMG.
Yeah.
And yeah, common players there will usually sell for even commons would be $1,000. And so, yeah, I would imagine a Casey there would be, $2,000 would not be a unreasonable amount for a card like that. So it does exist, but you're exactly right. Is there a market for that? And I think not that you're trying to move them all the time, but I think when you're spending that much, it's like you need to have an exit strategy.
Yeah.
An escape hatch on if you need to, if you're in free fall and you need to pull the ripcord, are you going to be able, right? Are you going to be okay on that? Without,
yeah, I mean, like the market value of the Gem Masters case, might be exactly the same as my Babe Ruth card, but which one's going to be easier to sell?
Well, which one's investable, and what's the potential look like in value in 10 years, 20 years, 50?
Yeah.
But yeah, exactly. The demand, the desirability. There's not a question. Look, I love Sean Casey, but that's Babe Ruth is Babe Ruth.
Right.
So that's an important thing to consider as well. Yeah. That's
the interesting thing is, I think we're at a point now, because I think we're past this speculative bubble phase of the sports card market that sort of washed through in 2000, 2001, and it's now kind of washed through now, and those ridiculously high spiked prices have passed, and now we're in kind of a normal market where I think honestly the best quote unquote investments are the cards that collectors want, which is ironic. I think the best investments are now the safest cards to buy are the cards that all the collectors want. So the Stan Usual 48 Bowman rookie card in a PSA 3 that looks amazing, that card is not going down.
No,
I'm sorry. Like, it's low grade, it's well presenting, it's a in demand card. It's not overpriced relative to a higher grade Usual, which might be in the 5 figures. Here you can buy one that's $700 and a PSA 3 that's beautifully centered. Every collector wants that card.
Yeah.
And when you see it at a show, it's getting bought. So it's like I think at this point, the best investments or the safest cards to buy are the cards that all the collectors want. So it's, great. That's the kind of market that I think is healthy. And I think the higher grade, higher value cards may, as the economy comes off here, are the most vulnerable ones. The ones that, it's out of the realm of most collectors. They're not paying up, $12,000 for a Usual rookie when they can buy one for $700.
Yeah, well, I think you're right. When 2021, 2022, when things were getting kind of crazy, you really could make, as long as you were making transactions in the hobby, you were doing well, right? It didn't really matter. Everything was rising. But you're right. Now that it's stabilized, it's tapered off. We've seen the fall back to reality, and we've been coasting a little. Yeah, I can see that for sure. And honestly, that's one of the things that kind of that makes me, I tend to stay in my lane, when it comes to 90s stuff and 80s stuff, and I tend to stay there early 2000s. I don't really deviate too much out of what I know. And part of why I don't do that is because I feel like if I know the market well for the things that I know really well, if there are opportunities, one of the things, I didn't mention this in my yearly goals video, but there are opportunities that come around sometimes if you know a market well of anything, whether it's a vintage market, the 90s insert markets, whatever, a certain player market, you'll know, if you know the market well, you'll be able to spot when there's an anomaly or something is listed way too low as a buy it now, and you can snap it up. But if you don't know what that market is, if you don't know it, then you won't be able to take advantage of opportunities that come along like that. And so you know, I, but so there are occasions, you know, last year where I did buy some things that I just thought were good deals, good value. Speaking of values of cards, if you know a market and you realize like, hey, I can buy this, you know, there was a Barry Bonds autographed rookie card. It was actually this, you know, this one kind of like this is rookie auto
Yep.
on 87 tops. I actually bought 2 of these last year. And I bought the second one because it was listed at kind of a crazy buy it now. And it was because it was a VG3. It was a PSA 3 authentic auto. And I mean, you could send it back in and get rid of the grade and just say authentic auto, you know, and but an autograph, a legitimate, you know, authenticated like from PSA, signed rookie of Bonds, you know, typically will sell, you know, $350.
Yeah, a card like that really doesn't matter what the grade is.
Yeah, and this guy had it like buy it now for 150, and so I'm like, okay, fine, we'll play that game. And so I feel like, yeah, there are opportunities if you do know the market where you can capture value, where you can, you know, I mean, dare I say, I call myself a flipper, you know, in certain cases like that where it makes sense. Um, so you know, when you're playing with higher value cards like that, you know, a change in the market, even of, you know, 10%, 20%, well, 20% of $500 is a big swing, you know. So it's a double-edged sword. You know, you can have some nice bigger wins when you have higher value cards that you're playing with. But it's also dangerous too because it swings the other way, and
Yeah,
you
you
know
can get over leveraged, and that's not
that's
a good place to be.
that's where the dangerous. You're right.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I want to focus on, you know, in this upcoming year is I'm not going to necessarily like stop doing that, but there were other cases too where, you know, things just didn't work out the way I was hoping to. You know, I tried to flip it maybe, and I thought the value was somewhere, and it turned out to be closer to where I got it from, and so I was just treading water on it, or, you know, just out the shipping on it, or something like that. But I think I would try to more carefully choose my spots when I'm trying to go after things like that. But again, if I'm going to choose, and there again, it's all opportunity cost too. You know, when you're pouring, you know, you're pouring resources into something like that, it's now money that you can't throw into something else that might pop up that's truly something you're targeting. And so
Is it worth tying up that money in that extra bond signed rookie while you're waiting for it to sell to
right.
then miss out on a really high value Maddox that might come up? Yeah,
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And so that's where this kind of plays in. It's navigating those waters, and there's not one, you know, one size fits all answer to this. It's not a one easy, you know, because again, if it works out well, that actually, you know, builds my hobby account, and in that case, it did. It helped me out. I did the same thing, you know, last year. There was this card came up in a PSA 10. This was a 96 Bowman's Best Atomic refractor, not the previews kind, but just the, you know, this one, and it finished way too low from what I thought it should be. And so I went ahead and bid on it. And I don't usually bid on PSA 10s, but for as low as it finished, I figured, look, I could probably resell that. And I did. And I was able to make a decent chunk back on it. But it's again, it's a risky maneuver because it doesn't always work out the way that you think it's going to work out.
yeah.
And in the process, yes, you're tying up those funds, you're taking them out of availability for use, and you risk missing opportunities for other things you really, really want to add. So I'm going to try to just be more careful and more selective coming up this year about things that come up like that with pricier, for me at least, cards and opportunities that come that way.
Agreed.
So, all right. Anything else you wanted to add about values of cards, bringing joy, or anything about? I liked your. So, is there any? I just want to add a follow up here. I noticed that you talked about collecting, investing, and you used the word speculating. Is there a reason you chose that word instead of flipping?
I just like it better. I think flipping is sort of implies a very short duration, where you're just quickly getting it, flipping it to somebody else. It's like very transactional.
Yeah.
Whereas you could be a speculator, really believe in a player, or really believe that a set will become more prominent, or believe that a player their market will grow and they will become more collectible, and it might take 5 more years. If you can see the hobby current moving in a certain direction, then you can say, okay, well, I'm going to start to pick up some of these more obscure pre-war strip cards, for example. Or now I can see Mookie Betts, as he's coming in through his career, he's going to be this generational guy. Maybe I'm seeing it a little bit earlier than the vast mainstream hobby sees it, as he's compiling numbers every year. So I'm going to start picking up some Mookie Betts cards while I can. And that's a form of speculation, because you're sort of speculating on his career playing out in a certain way. And it's a longer term thing. And it doesn't mean you're going to turn around and sell it. I don't plan on selling my Mookie Betts cards anytime soon. They're my long-term collection, but they're still a speculation, because I'm speculating on Mookie Betts being a Derek Jeter type of talent. So I'm picking up Betts because I'm pretty damn certain that he's that generational guy, and his legacy will be similar to Derek Jeter. And I think card values will act similar to Derek Jeter. If you were to pick up a big Derek Jeter card halfway through his career, you would be looking pretty good right now. If you had picked up, a big Jeter card, 20 years ago, when he was, or 23 years, whatever, mid career Derek Jeter, before the vast hobby masses realized the legacy of the five world championships, and the Yankee captain, and the generational guy that Derek Jeter, is known now as, then yeah, you'd be looking pretty good right now, and you'd be glad you picked up that big Jeter mid career. So I've been adding a couple Betts cards like that that are still somewhat, affordable for me. So it's not tipping over my bonsai tree by any means.
That's good.
But I'm making those moves now, and that is a form of long-term speculation. It's collector speculator. It's not, it's not flipper. I'm not trying to flip. I'm not trying to flip those Mookie Betts cards. I'm just trying to speculate and get ahead of the curve a little bit.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'd been sort of thinking about it as in the terms of like sort of slow motion flipping, but but maybe even slow to the point where you're not even looking to sell. I mean, it's really more of a long-term hold.
I just know I'm getting him cheaper now than I will be in 10 years. That's all.
Well, you're just locking in value. You're locking in value here,
right?
And predicting, speculating that sometime in the line 5, 10, 15.
I've never showed this before, but this is the Betts card that I just picked up.
All right, let me sell you here.
It is his. It's his first Bowman autograph. First Bowman Chrome autograph from 2014 in a BGS slab, which I think gives it another bump in value, because people hate BGS right now. But it's a BGS gem mint with a 10 auto, and it's his very first Bowman first on card auto. And so this is my big boy for Mookie Betts now, and I'm really happy to have it. For me, it's one of those cards that it scratches all 3 itches. It fills the collector, investor, and speculator itch within me, much like my Babe Ruth did. But if I'm gonna, lay out a significant sum of money for a card, it better be in some way all 3 things, and that card is. I have never showed that card, but I will next week on my Mookie Betts Revisited video.
I was gonna say, you have that one and Shohei coming up, so that's good.
I dropped Shohei yesterday.
Good.
Yeah, last night.
All righty. All right. Well, let's go ahead and leave that here for today, unless we don't have anything else to add to it. But I also had a discussion on value.
I think we covered some good ground there.
I think we did. Thank you, as always, for a great show. And until next time, we'll see you all on the next side.
Peace out.